Hi, my name is Doug Hall, and today I'm going to talk about a business idea, about resolving dilemmas. This is for one-person business, a solopreneur, all the way up to a large corporation. And this concept, this creative business system was created by Albert Lowe. He wrote a book called Zen Creative Management, which blends Eastern philosophy, specifically Zen Buddhism, with business. He followed up that book, Zen Creative Management, which was written in the late 70s, with conflict and creativity in the workplace in the early to mid 2000s. He took out all of the Zen and Buddhism out of it. But he kept the core of the concept, which was that businesses, when they resolve a dilemma, they create a product. And I believe that Albert Lowe coming up with this creative management system resolved a dilemma. And I think it's poignant today because, first of all, I hear the word dilemma more and more, maybe because I'm so focused on it, but we face a lot of dilemmas. And usually, dilemmas are looked at in terms of moral dilemmas. It often could be, but oftentimes, usually dilemma is, you have two choices and neither one of them are good, and you're trying to pick the least unpleasant solution. It's what's called is usually used two horns. It's either or. And the way that Albert Lowe looked at it, he looked at it as four horns. And he gives examples right in the foreword of the book, which I'll go into more detail in other videos, but I'm just giving a summary of what this concept is. And he goes into detail about resolving dilemmas. He gives real-world examples, business challenges, and then he proposes the question, can he come up with a kind of a system, a model that where you can kind of look at any kind of situation, any kind of dilemma, and use this model. And I think it can be used in not only business, but personal life. And gosh, we're so divided in politics. So I have written out his concepts on my website. This kind of marries several different chapters because all the chapters are connected with each other. And this is quite detailed, but I'm going to kind of cover the most kind of general themes. So I'm going to draw it out a little bit. Greatest here. We'll see what we can do. Okay, so the first horn is simple. Now, you often hear people say, I just want a simple solution. And, before I saw this model, which I've been, the system that I've been following for 10 years, I talk about that on my website, about how this book has kind of taken me captive. And I wouldn't say 24/7, 365, but it's taken me captive to try to figure out what he was trying to say. There's still some areas that I'm learning, and I'm looking for partners to kind of talk about this, especially for large corporations, because my niche is kind of more smaller business. But this model is scalable. So, but again, we hear this idea simple. We want a simple solution. However, simple can be good, but it can leave things out. And I'll go into that in more detail, but it can be incomplete when it's simple. And the second horn is complete. Okay, so these two concepts, simple and complete, are conflict with each other. There's a tension here. I might have to change that because there are some here that are compatible, and I'll talk about that. So complete means, it's complex is another way of saying it. And again, I'll go into more detail here. The word I want to put here is they're antagonistic. Towards one another. Now, give me another example of an antagonism within a business is, say, the finance department with the engineering department or other departments. There's a natural tension. And tension is a big theme within the book. And there's good tension and bad tension. And this is kind of a good tension, but you have to kind of be aware of that tension, and you don't want it to be too high or too low. And I'll go into more detail about that later. So now there's a really big theme or themes within this model, and one of them especially in these two, has to do with time. And very important, time. How the Eastern model or Zen model looks at time compared to Western, chronological time. So I'll go into more detail, but if you just kind of keep this in mind, simple can often we want that simple solution can happen very quickly. Whereas, so there's a saying here, as soon as possible, so I'll just say ASAP, and down here, but as long as necessary. And I'm using this pen because it's the best one I have, as long as necessary. Another way of saying this, as soon as possible, but not a minute sooner. I heard that somewhere. I'm just going to put here, now there's a definition of work and dilemma. I'll read it to you, and I'll go into more detail. To do mental work, it is necessary to face and resolve a dilemma. And it is because of this that work is hard. If there were no dilemma, there'd be no mental work. But because there is a dilemma, work is necessary. So that's important to kind of keep in mind. Okay, so now we've got two horns here so far. Simple and complete. Okay, and again, these two are antagonistic to each other. Now, the third one, let's see if I can try another pen here. Pragmatic. Ooh, yeah, this works. Pragmatic. Now, these are very strongly antagonistic to each other. Now, the thing about pragmatic is, and there's more ways of describing this, but it works. And people don't want to give up what works. But what works isn't always simple, right? Now, pragmatic and complete are complementary. Let me see here. Complementary. So, pragmatic, it works, and complete. This takes longer, oftentimes for pragmatic to, I'm just throwing ideas out. I have other ways of describing it, but to me, something that works, again, it's not necessarily the simplest thing in the world. It can be more complicated, but it works. Okay, so let me put that in here. Okay, so the fourth one is communicable. Okay, so in some ways I feel like this is the key in resolving the dilemma, but I may be wrong on that, but that's just what I've found personally. I have some personal experiences, and these are antagonistic with each other. Pragmatic. It's not strongly, but it is antagonistic. They are antagonistic. And these two are complementary. Communicable and simple. Because, if something is simple, it's oftentimes it's easily communicable. You can communicate it pretty easily to people. The more complicated, this is, it's weakly antagonistic. spelling here. Antagonistic. Okay. My gosh. Yeah. Okay. Antagonistic, weakly. Okay. So, now, I mentioned this involves time, right? Well, these two involve space. And I'm here in our warehouse space in a conference room. And for the last nearly 20 years, I've been managing our family garage, 600 square feet. And I grew up in an entrepreneurial environment here in Silicon Valley. Space is at a premium. We had plenty of space on the property, but my mother liked to hold on to things, my father not so much. So there was a conflict there. But they all also grew up in the Depression, and they have that mentality. So it's, if you always look at something as with value in mind, and this model talks about value versus quality versus cost, and that all of these ideas fit in here. But again, from a general perspective, so I know a thing or two about finding space. There was 5 families that utilized this garage I managed, and I had certain techniques that I used to organize it. One of the things, when I finally started figuring out what I was in the business of in managing that garage, was creating space. Now, there's a well-known saying from a famous Rinpoche, Tibetan teacher. He said, laughter is finding space where there isn't any. And I think we all know if we're really stressed, even having mental health issues, which is common these days, especially here in Silicon Valley. I call it Stress Valley. The sense of humor is sometimes hard to find. So there's this idea, very important idea that we have these thoughts, we put them into form, which I believe is moving from idea to space. So this space has to do with form. Ideas more in this area. And I don't want to jump ahead of myself, but a product is an idea put into form where there is a demand. People are willing to commit to pay money. So the whole solution here is idea, form, demand. You have a product. And in some ways, that's his system in a nutshell. But easier said than done to get to this, to get here. So the book is very comprehensive, and it goes into how, why, and what to do in order to come up with this. And what I like about this model is, first of all, it takes it out of the duality of resolving dilemmas in the normal kind of Western logical way. And here's a very important concept. And again, in some ways, this is mentioned in the foreword of the book. I mean, he spells it out right in the book. And he gives you the answer. And the answer is meditation. And looking at Zen and kind of the systems, he gives you why Zen is more advantageous than, say, the Western model, especially the psychodynamic model in mental health, which is often translated into Western business. It's very, very detailed. And I believe there's a whole consulting system, and I'm not alone. I mean, this book was used in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It's still known, and it's used in universities. And you'll see, even currently, there's paradox concepts on how to deal with paradoxes. And there's whole systems that big companies are trying to use because they know they face paradoxes and they have to move very quickly. And again, but what they're doing is, I believe they're still using logical ways to resolve problems. And what Albert Lowe talks about is how logical solutions do not resolve dilemmas. We need logic. Buddhism looks at logic to dispel a lot of reasoning, because the reasoning can be faulty. If you're using logic, but look at today's politics. We can't agree on facts. Form. These are facts. We have an idea, a thought, we put them into form and facts. We can't agree on what facts are. So how can you logically come up with a solution if people can't agree on facts? So this idea, he has a saying, it's ideas are conceived in the cosmos, but perceived in the organism. So famous musicians say, "Oh, I didn't do this. I was just a conduit." Well, solopreneurs, creative people, they are conduits of these ideas. And the higher level the idea, the longer it takes to put it into action. Sometimes that's because of society's not ready for a solution. The person doesn't have the money for it. Or like in Steve Jobs or Oprah Winfrey or Henry Ford, these can take multi-generations to manifest themselves. Okay, so ideas conceived in the cosmos, perceived in the organism. So that's where meditation comes into play. The more we're able to receive these ideas, and it's not like you just have one idea. There's idea put into form. Is there a demand? And then there's refining. There's other ideas, within the business to get this product to the market. I mean, there's lots of things going on. Okay, is this making sense? So one of the reasons why I like this concept or this system is, from from personal experience, I used the word tension earlier. There's this tension, strong tension between these two areas. And I'm just going through this. This is part of my business model of creating 15-minute videos, almost interviews with small businesses, to explain these concepts while having a conversation with business owners, so they can say, "Oh yeah, I can relate to this," or "Can you explain what more?" It could be like an hour and a half interview, but we break it down into 15 minutes that can be, I think, quite valuable. Like this model, this kind of diagram, to me, it's quite helpful. Now, somebody might look at this and say, "Oh my gosh, this is like so complicated." But as we're learning a language here. I teach Qigong and Tai Chi. That's a physical language. We all know how to learn languages. It can be, it's harder as we get older, but we can do it. And language actually comes up in this book. Noam Chomsky is quoted, and his work about language and projection. This system is a way to project. That's what we do with language. And he talks about work being a wonderful place to project our anxieties, our depressions, our emotions into this milieu or medium. And that's why it's so powerful. But it can also be cutthroat, like capitalism, where it's not, it's not regulated, and it's not, the money distribution. One of the concepts about money is it's related to will or desire, which is another really interesting concept, which has been an area of my interest for as long as I've been a professional, because I've been looking for a system. I've been looking for work that is meaningful, not just about money. So this model shows why money is not the number one motivator, or should be the number one motivator. And I talked to the author via email before he died in 2017. I found the book. He was gracious enough to respond to me. He was running the Zen Center and in Montreal. And he said, well, companies are too focused on money to follow his model. Well, we are seeing where that's getting us. And my hope is that this kind of continues to, because people are talking about this. There's lots of different systems out there, but my passion is bringing spirit into the workplace. And as Albert Lowe talked about, it was in the workplace hundreds of years ago, before the West deified work. And, this big debate over capitalism and, what Adam Smith was talking about versus these other economists. I heard Adam Smith would not be in favor at all of unregulated capitalism because it's monopolies. Currently there's monopolies of money, capital, and money is an expression of will or desire. It's our creative way of expressing ourselves. And when you have too much money concentrated in so few hands, you get perverse ways of expression and inefficient use of public and private money. And private money is used $47 million for a wedding, renting Venice, Italy for a week. It's ridiculous. These people, and it's not just public works. Again, the way that money was, how income and wealth was taxed up until the 50s or 60s. You couldn't have this accumulation of wealth like you do now. And people say, like Bill Gates, I've heard even Melinda Gates, when they were still married, they were on David Letterman or some show, and they were saying how they should increase the taxes, and Bill and Melinda were saying, oh, it's going to disincentivize the entrepreneurs. Well, I'm segueing away from this, but this model talks about 9 different types of work. And entrepreneurial work, although valuable, even in large corporations amongst the individual employees, is risky. It's like a venture capitalist. They say only 1 out of 10 businesses succeed, so they have to take advantage of that risk. And so the 1 out of the 10 entrepreneurs gets all the business, all the wealth if they hit it. The other 9 oftentimes go broke or whatever, or they keep trying. But it's risky. There's 8 other types of work that he talks about. Paid work, which is very important. You need that reliable money to come in. There's work to deal with the friction, the tension in the business, where there's mistakes, and you gotta clean that up. Keeping the books in the business. If you don't do that, and you got to go back and, like the way I've kept my books, I keep it all together, and then all of a sudden tax time, I got to go through it. And rather than, doing it all along. Well, large businesses have a separate department to handle all of that, whereas a solopreneur, they've got to do that or farm it out. This is another delegation. One of the causes of tension, bad tension, is poor delegation. So finding out where there's poor delegation. It happens not only, I know our family, we can work okay with each other, although that can be debatable because of the tension. But then delegating to other people, like we had a vegan food business at the farmers markets. We were in a 10 by 10 booth, and there's a time limit, 4 hours, between 0 and 4 hours, high tension, different jobs at different times of the day. To be, we had to communicate with people, and if you poor delegation, tension increases. Good delegation, tension decreases. Tension in this model is not necessarily bad. We need tension to get off the couch. And he goes into some historical views on stress and tension, and trying to find that level that's optimal. So good tension, bad tension, too high tension, too low tension. That's discussed in this model. So we need that. I mentioned cost and quality. So here, I'm still learning this idea, but cost and quality, simple, pragmatic. You're dealing more with, lower cost. People like that. The more complete and communicable, the higher level of the product, the quality. Now you can have a high quality product, but low value. I mean, value is also in here. Like a doorstop could have a high value, but very low quality. I just went and saw these food vending systems. It's a 10 by 10 feet high too. It was created in part by Google. They had a food booth concept and paid $69,000 each for these things. They're sitting in a warehouse and they're for sale. And I went and saw them. And right now, that value, high quality, low value, not being put to use. So let's just look at this again. Why I find this valuable is to me, if you look at it, it's almost like if you have two hands. I remember in high school learning how to drive. We were in this portable room, where it was an extension of the high school. And it had a simulator in there, a driving simulator. I don't think they use them anymore. And it's different than these gaming systems. So anyway, it's like you're driving or landing a plane. I feel like when you're getting close to this product, it's almost like you're landing a plane. Now, when you land, you can have a new idea or a new product even related to this. But I like this because we're projecting onto this. And again, back to language, we project onto it. It only works to an extent. And again, that's why work is so valuable. It helps us deal with our anxiety and our stress. You know what happens to people young adults when they don't have work? It's very stressful because the mind is complicated, and you have high stress when people are not working and finding value in themselves, when the society doesn't find value in what they do. So to me, I like this idea. So one of the questions I pose to myself is, where am I at here? We're here, right? As soon as possible, as long as necessary. Here, as few resources or people as possible, as many as necessary. So a lot of people want to do it on their own. You're this self-made person. And it drives me crazy in Silicon Valley hearing this, because there's so many people, so many resources that help them get to where they are going. And now I just remembered of a thought I wanted, the 9 types of work. It's similar to the concept of ice in the native Alaskan people, native indigenous people in Alaska. They have over 10 words to describe ice. It's so valuable to them. Keeping food cold, melting for water, building igloos, all of these things. So their entrepreneurial work is just one piece of the pie. And we put so much value on it. Quarterback on a football team making $50 million, whereas you've got not only all the football players, but all the people that are playing, the practice squad, who are putting themselves on the line and making nothing. The staff who built the stadium, who do the concessions, all these people making minimum wage, and this guy is making $50 million a year. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, and what Albert Lowe talks about is roles and role cycles, work cycles, and how important it is to be clear about all the jobs and what the roles are. He talks about how, job descriptions are they're not focused on results. It's more about not enough about it's more about the list of jobs to do versus, I don't know if it's how to get there, because there's lots of ways to get there to the result. Like our booth, the food booth, 4 hours. Our goal was to make $1,000 a day in revenues. Consistently, any gig that we did, $1,000, so 4 hours. And once in a couple times, if other booths weren't there, we had less competition, or at a special event. I just lost my train of thought. So the job description oftentimes is thrown in the desk once the person's hired, because you want to know what's expected of this person. And again, back to the dilemma. He talks about how a lot of people don't want to work on mental work. In fact, they find it harder to do than physical work. I look at people who do physical labor, like my very first job was sweeping. And I volunteer at a art and kind of spiritual center in Japantown, and I do it for mental health. I mean, I go there and I sweep once a week. And I'm not only appreciative of people who did our picked up our yard, for the 50 years that we were there. When we grew up and we left the house, we no longer did it. Helped my parents. But on the other hand, I'm also envious. There's just this physical work. They've got other dilemmas. These people who are immigrants, who have people family back home that they're sending money to, all this other stress. But the work itself oftentimes is just, you're just doing it. Versus mental work is hard. And Albert Lowe talks about people standing around the water cooler doing anything but work. They're avoiding it because they don't know what to do. Does that make sense? Because again, they're trying to resolve it logically. And the tension between departments, again, there's good tension and bad tension. One of the other things he talks about with employees, a lot of managers will think that there's a bad apple. They have an employee that's just a bad apple. Well, Albert Lowe talks about that's usually a lot less than a manager wants. That manager thinks that it's an issue. It's most oftentimes poor tension, bad tension. Poor delegation. Okay, so I won't go into this, but there's a whole chapter on the 9 different types of work. There's a chapter on quality, on communication, on ability, and capacity. This ability, this capacity to receive the ideas. Not everybody has that, or if they're too logical or they're too stressed, there's no space. And that's what I feel like that's the business I'm in, is creating space. When we don't have that space, that's one of the elements I've been studying Tibetan medicine since COVID started online, 500 hours. Not a lot of practicum work, but one of the elements is space. And each element has, as one of its makeup, is emptiness. And space is part of that. Even space has emptiness. You need emptiness so that two things can merge. That is a huge concept in this book. And that's where the tension comes within ourselves, within being human. There is a natural suffering. And Albert Lowe goes into this in detail, and how these concepts are becoming more widely spread. I don't have to preach them. I mean, mindfulness in the workplace. I don't have to preach that, but that's becoming big here in Silicon Valley, and not just from a wellness point of view now, but actually from a strategic point of view. So it's a very big concept in this book. Let me just look at my notes here. Another concept here, and this wasn't in the book, but it came in when I heard a Dharma talk from a Zen teacher out of the San Francisco Zen Center. I was lucky enough to hear that through a Zen center I'm affiliated with in Japantown, and they said, advertise your dilemma. I think a lot of people kind of don't want to reach out. They're embarrassed. There's too much tension, or their ego gets in the way. They think they can. They've got a system that works. Is it Albert Lowe who talked about this, or Steve Hagen in Buddhism Plain and Simple, or his other book, Buddhism, Is That What You Think? There's a story of there's a man, right? It's kind of dusk, it's dark, lights are on in the parking lot, and he's looking, he's in the kind of the, I don't know if he's in the bushes, but another man walks up and he says, "Oh, what are you looking for?" And he goes, "Oh, I lost my keys." And, they're right underneath this big light. And he said, where did you last lose them? And he goes, "Oh, over there." And the guy goes, "Oh, why aren't you looking over there?" And he goes, "Oh, well, the light's here." So it's kind of a way of, it works, This is the light. Usually I find things when there's lights, or, whatever. A well-lit place helps us find something. Or we're looking where we found something before. this communicable concept is, it's a higher level idea. And entrepreneurial ideas oftentimes will come up with a higher level idea. Not always so, though. I mean, sometimes entrepreneurial ideas, they just beat a dead horse and come up with more and more apps to make things more and more efficient. Whereas we need something that's a higher level idea to kind of raise raise everybody's. I mean, this is what Judah Krishnamurti's teachings, which part of my system, I will incorporate Albert Lowe's work, but it will incorporate some of Judah Krishnamurti's teachings. And he said, I forgot what Krishnamurti said. One of the things he said is, if you follow his system, you'll probably go broke. He said that in the 1930s. But he died with $1 million in his trust in the foundation. Money was not important to him as long as his basic things were taken care of. And he started schools that talked about this idea and facts and dealing with the emotions around facts, not just thoughts. He thought that we needed thinking to create all this technology and make life easier. But then when it went into the psychological realm and created all this stress and anxiety, that's what we have to deal with, and to sit with these things, to see that there's no separation between self and other. And again, that's where Albert Lowe talks about this tension within ourselves, being the center of the universe, and then being the object of someone else's center, and how there is tension, crippling anxiety at times. And that's where meditation and a spiritual practice helps us, and work helps us. Work can help us to a point. But this idea of as few as resources as possible, we need people. And when I look at this system, I kind of look, okay, where am I at? Do I need another resource or person to help me get to where I want it, to help me reach my vision or my goal? To work with this original idea or ideas that I have. So the more resources, money, people I use, I start to get closer to here. And again, there's tension between these areas. And we don't want to go all the way to here or all the way to here. We want to find this kind of happy medium in the middle. And so that's the kind of general concept. I'm not sure if there's anything else I want to say. One of the other important concepts in this model is structure versus process. And he devotes several chapters to this. And he breaks it down to different departments in businesses. Some form the structure of the business. The other departments form the process of the business. And in some ways, he uses the term isomorphic and a holon. These are other isomorphic. And holon. And I've got lots of these concepts on my website, zentrepreneur.com. That's the word Z for Zen, and then entrepreneurial.com, zentrepreneur.com. I have images that help with this. In fact, yeah, there's the Janus figure here is mentioned in my diagram. But that, again, that you look at a one-person business all the way to thousands and thousands of employees. It's the same, that there's this isomorphic kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Reality might be the right word, I don't know. But it's like going into ourselves with the cell that all these millions and millions of cells. If you keep breaking it down, it has the same kind of structure to it, and almost the same process, or maybe the same process of human life. There's no difference there, and businesses have that same kind of makeup. He describes it as a field. Businesses are fields. This idea, form, demand, it's a field. You have the finance or the owner. You have the employees and the customer. All three are of equal value in this model. But that's not the case in business. There's examples of the owner taking advantage of the employees, or the owner taking advantage of the customer taking advantage of the business. Sometimes the employees can take advantage, unions can take advantage of the owners. But these three have equal value, just how these three have equal value. The different departments, engineering, sales, manufacturing. So you've got the designing of it, the making of it, and the linking of it to the customer. So all of these are interconnected. But the structure and process, I think, is really a valuable idea. You need the structure to withstand the tension of a business. He talks about how in the Western model, process is king. Science is very process-oriented, versus structure is, he talks about the pragmatic being the logic of structure. It's like the map. Here's the map. This is the territory. The image I just had was in, the warfare now. They're fighting with drones. These people, they're thousands of miles away in a control room, and they're using drones for the fighting. But before, it was the soldiers were fighting in the territory. So the map, it's like all your training. I almost became a therapist. All these concepts are great, but then you get into the field and you're working with clients, it's a whole different animal. And, you've got to be able to have intuition to be able to kind of receive ideas. But it's not the only thing that you need. You need to be able to use the structure and to use your structure and then kind of test it out and see if there's a demand with the public. The process is the creating of the product, utilizing the structure. There's a tension that goes inward, and the structure has to be able to withstand that. I have this, there's this structure going inward, this tension, and then there's the tension going outward, the process where it has to be birthed. The baby has to be birthed. I kind of equate, I've been recently in some projects where the tension was astronomical for me personally. And I was in many ways very grateful afterwards. It's hard to be grateful in the middle of it, but to be able to see what he's talking about so much tension, like people going through IPOs in Silicon Valley, and where there's money problems in the business and they're running out of money and they're looking for venture capital, they're trying to go public. I don't know if I want to name but this is a huge company, and this, they had trouble getting money. They had some offers of to put into the business. I guess the investors weren't taking it, but there was calls to close the business, I think, or just the astronomical tension. And one of the founders, who's very wealthy now, was cowering in the kitchen because people were pounding on the doors like, "Where's our money? What's going on?" And then eventually this business, billions and billions and billions of dollars. Ridiculous, yes, but that's the way it is. And this person experienced what tension was. Well, that's where I've experienced tension, and that's where reaching out to people where you have to invest, but you share in the experience, and you kind of even this out. I was trained in a model called process therapy through the Process Therapy Institute. It was the 1 year that I actually enjoyed while getting my 3,000 hours. I ended up leaving in that therapy world, not becoming a therapist, because I was, first of all, fearful. I had not discovered Buddhism or meditation. I was just being introduced to ideas like the law of attraction. And so I'm very thankful for that training. But that model of process therapy was about getting bigger than the problem. But I was learning that system. I always kind of kept it in the back of my mind. And so I know some things about process. I know some things about structure, but I'm looking, and I know some things about tension, and I feel like I went toe to toe with someone who knows a thing or two with tension in Silicon Valley, and it was around territory, which is a very big, interesting concept in this book. It's called Territory and the Manager, and it's how he describes animal behavior and how animals, the drive for territory is stronger than the drive for procreation. Oftentimes, a female, like a female wolf, will not be attracted to a wolf that has no territory and is only attracted to the alpha wolf in a pack. The other males are out of luck in terms of that. Now, for the last, I don't know how long, most people do not have physical territory that they own. People own their home, but most people don't. If you look at the 8 billion people in this world, most people do not have territory. So where do you see this territorial behavior that creates attention? It's in the role in the workplace. And up until several decades ago, this was male dominated, and now it's female, male identity, and some is not in it. So the role in the workplace is very important, and this is where a lot of tension is. And people, colleagues, oftentimes subconsciously or unconsciously will sabotage their colleagues over roles, over the territory. He describes behavior in the animal kingdom. It's vicious. There's not killing or anything, but it's like embarrassment. They're shaming other fellow species members. So it's really important to be clear about roles. And I go back to entrepreneurial behavior and entrepreneurial roles. There is an important role that entrepreneurial work plays, but it's so overblown in Silicon Valley, because there's so many other different types of work that's important. You need, and it's risky, and it creates tension in relationships. Relationships is another word. Sorry, I'm writing all over the place, but this is where Krishnamurti's teachings come in. The root cause of tension in relationships, breaking up of relationships, is one party wants to do it one way, another party wants to do it another way, and we butt heads. And this whole concept puts that out into out of our heads, because so much of this tension and conflict around roles, around these different aspects, concepts, it's unconscious, or it's in our thoughts. We're projecting onto this, just like an artist does. And these are limits. We got limits. We need a limit. Limits is another part of this book. These are limits here. I mentioned this word. These are operations, and operations are types of limits. I have another 15 or 20 minutes. I'll close there. But let's take a little break. So, what I want to put out to you, the listener, is what ideas are coming to you while watching this? What, how, and why questions are very important. What questions lead to facts? How questions lead to functions? Oops. And why questions lead to structure? how can I use this model in my current work as a solopreneur, as an employee, as a small business owner. Why am I doing it this way, this idea versus that? Why am I doing it this way versus that? Idea put into form, this versus that. Why this versus that? This is, to me, very helpful psychologically. Why am I feeling this way versus that way? When I'm at home, why am I feeling this way, calm, versus that way in the workplace where I'm stressed? What is it about that environment? What is it about that environment that's conducive to well-being and creativity versus this environment at work that's so stressful? I'm just feeling a lot of emotions here because I've been working on this for 10 years. And I finally have some technology to record this. I'm feeling blessed. I have some resources, with money. We just sold our family house. I'm thankful to my parents. All the people that helped us to sell the place. My siblings, all the work that we put in to help, with my parents to keep us in the house. I use this system. Using communication, not always, successfully with my siblings, with my neighbors. But also knowing when the product is here and the plane has landed, so to speak. It's like, we're ready, deliver it. We're ready for the next product, the next dilemma, or to build on this. So there's time, as soon as possible, but not a minute sooner, as long as necessary, as few resources as possible or people. And he gives, real world, real business oriented ideas like customer service. So technical people out there listening to this, when we're in stressful situations, we like simple, right? Because the fight or flight or freeze hormones are kicking in, and it's very hard to make logical decisions. And so if you get little insights along the way, if you it reminds me of another book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Very difficult book to get through, for me at least. But there is I believe it's 12 steps, a gem inside the middle of this book on how to get unstuck. And one of the ideas is that you cannot get unstuck, because I think that's where oftentimes you get stuck in this process. You can't get unstuck logically. It's not going to come out logically. It's going to come You got to put the time into it. You got to put the effort into it. But it's just going to come to you. This idea conceived in the cosmos. It's just going to come. You got to put it, and then once it comes, oftentimes it feels like right now. It feels like it's flowing here. But yeah, and you have to know something about it, to get unstuck. You can't just all of a sudden, I'm going to put the effort in and I'm going to become a 49er wide receiver. No. You've got to have the ability, the capacity, the desire, the time put in. You got to have all that. But maybe what separates people, the 1 out of the 10 is that receiving. Again, lots of concepts here. This model, as I mentioned, it's not a 24/7, 365 model for me. It's kind of like creativity. It comes and goes. This is what the book is, Zen Creative Management. But when, I think Phil Jackson said this, meditation is more, and the Buddhist ideas were more helpful the more you need it. The more, like when he was coaching the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan, getting closer and closer to the championship, the end of the year, the playoffs. He used to take his pulse in the middle of these games when they were very stressful, and he always looked so calm. So these ideas help, I think, the more you need it. So I think it ebbs and flows for me. When I feel stuck, when I'm out looking at a resource. Right now we've got a warehouse space. It's expensive. I'm trying to figure out how can we utilize this. Where's the demand? Where's the space in there? What do we need to get rid of? What do we bring in? These are the concepts I'm bringing in. What additional resource or person do I need to maybe partner with? How much time? I want this as soon as possible, but not a minute sooner. What this warehouse has done for me is created space. The tension was high, and it's created space for me to figure out what's next. So these, again, questions. What questions? How questions? Why questions? This idea of will and desire. Again, this has been a focus of mine. I have a website, desireatwork.com. That's an idea. I've had that for several years. I think I have one kind of concept on there. In fact, from Process Therapy Institute, Don Hadlock had this 7-step exercise. I did it for 3 years every day. It helped me get through a 1-year teaching assignment. Actually, I lived in China for 3 years. And I left very quickly. I was out of money. I was living out of my car for 30 days in San Francisco. And I had the help of my parents, got me a ticket. I found a job online. Family friend, Clarina, told me about a job site for teaching jobs in China. I found a place in Guangzhou, China. My brother was living in Hong Kong at the time. I ended up living there for a year, but it was very stressful teaching. I was teaching business, human resource development, and marketing. I hadn't come up with this, I hadn't seen this. I would have loved to it. I did teach them some psychological ideas about lowering stress because of my training at the Process Therapy Institute. But the 7-step process about creating your desires. So I've been working on this system and this idea about will and desire. It is connected to this tension of being human, of thinking we're the center of the universe, and also, but everyone else thinking the same thing. And that tension of being the center of the universe and being someone else's other, being the periphery. Huge concept in the book, and this helps with that. This model helps with that model, as does meditation. It's the ultimate kind of thing. He says it in the foreword. There's a term in, we got about 10 minutes left. So I hope you're thinking of questions you can ask me after seeing this. There's a concept in the foreword about meditation, because this idea that because he talks about technology, he references Heidegger about, although technology being helpful, that man would have foregone his greatest strength, which is to be able to meditate, to kind of contemplate their situation. And that will become so dependent and fall in love with technology. And it's just getting worse. Here I am using technology, it helps, but it talks about this in the foreword. It's what got us in the problem in the first place. And Jiddu Krishnamurti says the same thing. Thinking gets us into trouble. It helps us. It's like the broom, the magical broom in the mythology where we cast a spell. It's like we wish it would do all the work for us. But then we lose control of it, like in potentially nanotechnology. And AI. So this term of meditation, there's a French phrase, un reculer pour mieux sauter, which means to recoil and to jump higher, even higher than we could go. And the concept is like, if you know of like ivy or, a weed that butts up against concrete and goes around it somehow, but it's even stronger because I don't know if it's learned. It's like, for example, with they've done experiments with trees. They protect these trees that are built to, that are in their DNA to grow very tall. They protect it from wind for 30 feet. And then all of a sudden, at 30 feet, they just fall over. And I don't even think there needs to be wind there. It just falls over. The wind, which is an element in the body, not only in Tibetan medicine, but in Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine, it is an element. So wind is needed for that tree to get stronger, because it's not only an element within the tree, but the external wind, there's no separation. If you look at the Eastern philosophies, is it makes it stronger. There's something released in the the chemicals in the tree, and together with the wind, the earth, the sun, the water, it will not grow to its fullest potential if it doesn't have the elements like wind. So again, we need tension. So meditation, which is another big concept in this book, versus the Western model, which is to look at conflict and traumatic experiences as something you have to befriend it, which is the Eastern model, but you have to get over it in the Western model. Whereas in the Eastern model with Zen, you need that experience. You need traumatic experiences. Once in a while, it leads to very unfortunate and uncomfortable, unpleasant situations, but we need it to grow. If we don't have experiences, we will not grow. We will not be alive. We need those experiences. Does this make sense? Am I talking a foreign language? And it may seem like that. These concepts, I've had to look at them, not just the meanings like in the business world or whatever, but at the root word, the root meanings, which is a passion of mine. I never knew that I would actually use my Latin from high school. So thank you, Mr. Barron. He was a wonderful teacher. Too bad I did not take it more seriously then. But the root words of things, dilemma, fact, form, doing, all these words have Latin basis. I'm just about to wrap up here, about 2 minutes. Anyway, I appreciate if you stayed through the whole talk. I'm going to try to scale this down to 15 minutes. I don't think I can do that, but just going to step away from this a little bit so you can see it one more time. So this unreculé pour mieux sauter. So meditate. Just start a minute. We need our thoughts, but we also can get lost in thoughts. So we notice when we get lost in thought, we come back. We build that muscle of coming back and coming back to our breath. And so we can kind of get some perspective, stepping back and looking at this. See how this model, at least maybe one concept or two concepts that you can take with you, and please ask questions, comments. You can have a conversation about this. My idea of 15-minute conversation with people, with business owners, with solopreneurs, employees, is to have this described, and then people can kind of say, well, this is what's happening and this is what I think. And then I can kind of share what I think about that particular topic that they're talking about. I really feel like these two ideas complement, this idea of 15 minutes. I had an experience at the age of 10 that kind of changed my life, and I look at it as 15 minutes can change your life. Here's an hour and a half. Hopefully this has changed your life. Anyway, thank you very much. I really appreciate you listening to this. This has been a summary of Zen and Creative Management and how to resolve dilemmas.